When the judge pounded his gavel and ordered me to remove my Navy cross, my sister-in-law Rosemary smirked, thinking she had finally broken me. The entire courtroom fell deathly silent, staring at the small, polished metal pin to my uniform jacket, a medal I bled for, awarded for carrying wounded teammates through enemy fire. Rosemary believed her lawsuit would strip away my dignity, my inheritance, and my reputation. She stood beside her high-priced lawyer, convinced her influence in this small town had secured her total victory. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply unpinned the medal with steady hands, set it gently on the wooden desk, and looked the judge dead in the eye. That was the exact moment I laid down my trap, and the judge's smirk instantly faded into sheer horror as he realized what he'd just done on record. Before we dive into how it all unfolded, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with the city or country you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. My name is Claire Vance. At 28 years old, I thought the hardest, most brutal moments of my life were behind me in the dust and heat of military service as a Navy corpsman. But nothing in my combat training prepared me for the cold, calculating war that broke out inside my own family the moment I returned home. After my parents passed away, leaving behind our family home and a flourishing local hardware business, my brother's wife, Rosemary, made her move. Rosemary was the kind of woman who viewed every family relation as a financial transaction. The funeral flowers hadn't even wilted before she cornered me in my father's study, surrounded by 2 decades of his hard work. She stood there, arms crossed, looking at me with absolute contempt. "Claire," she said, her voice dripping with synthetic concern, "you've been away playing soldier. You don't know how to run a business, and frankly, a military veteran doesn't need or deserve a multi-million-dollar inheritance. You should sign the estate over to us. We'll make sure you get a modest stipend to help you transition to civilian life." When I quietly refused to hand over everything my parents had built, her sweet demeanor vanished instantly. Her eyes narrowed into slits. She told me right then that if I wouldn't give her the estate willingly, she would use every connection in this town to take it from me and leave me with nothing. That was the day the war truly began. Rosemary didn't waste a single second making good on her threat. Within 2 weeks, I was served with legal papers right outside my parents' house. She had hired the most ruthless, high-priced firm in the county and filed a massive lawsuit against me, aiming to completely invalidate my parents' final will. Her strategy was as malicious as it was calculated. She alleged undue influence, claiming that I had somehow coerced my aging parents into making me the primary beneficiary right before they died. To make matters worse, she began spreading vicious rumors around our small town, claiming I was mentally unfit, financially reckless, and incapable of managing the family business. Rosemary's family had deep roots in the local establishment. Her father was a former town councilman, and her lawyer was golf partners with half the county judges. Everywhere I turned, the game felt rigged. Local business associates who had known my parents for 30 years suddenly stopped taking my calls. People I grew up with looked at me with suspicion. Sitting alone at my father's desk, watching everything my family had built get dragged through the dirt, I realized I was facing an uphill battle against an entrenched network of local power. Rosemary thought she held every single card, believing her connections made her completely untouchable. What she failed to realize was that I hadn't spent 6 years as a Navy corpsman without learning how to analyze an enemy's defense, find their blind spots, and wait for the perfect moment to strike back. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived, heavy with humidity and tension. I stepped into the county courthouse wearing my official Navy service dress blue uniform. Pinned proudly over my left breast was my Navy cross, a constant reminder of the men I'd saved and the values I lived by. I didn't wear it for show. I wore it because my father, a proud veteran himself, had always taught me to stand tall in moments of crisis. As I took my seat at the defense table beside my attorney, Marcus, I could feel the cold, mocking stares from across the aisle. Rosemary sat there in an expensive cream-colored suit, whispering smugly to her lead attorney, Richard Vance, no relation to me, but a man notorious in this county for winning dirty. When Judge Arthur Vance entered and took the bench, the room fell dead silent. Right away, the atmosphere shifted. Judge Vance didn't just seem acquainted with Rosemary's legal team, he was practically acting as their co-counsel. Every reasonable objection Marcus raised was instantly overruled with a sharp bang of the gavel. Every wildly speculative claim Richard Vance made about my character was met with nods of warm encouragement from the bench. Richard began his opening remarks not by discussing estate law, but by launching a direct attack on my appearance. He gestured dramatically toward my chair, scoffing, "Your Honor, the defense is engaging in cheap theatrical tactics. Bringing active-duty military decorum into a civil probate court is a transparent attempt to manipulate this venue." As Richard spoke, I noticed Judge Vance subtly leaning toward the prosecution table, exchanging a brief, knowing smirk with Rosemary. That tiny, arrogant gesture confirmed the quiet suspicion Marcus and I had been investigating for weeks. This judge wasn't just biased, he was deeply in their pocket. Judge Vance slammed his gavel down, the sharp crack echoing off the high marble walls. He glared down from the bench, his eyes narrowing as he fixed his gaze directly on me. "Counsel is entirely correct," Judge Vance declared, his voice booming with forced indignation. "This court will not tolerate blatant displays designed to intimidate this proceedings or sway judicial objectivity. Miss Vance, you will remove that Navy cross immediately, or I will cite you for contempt and have you removed from my courtroom." Across the aisle, Rosemary's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. She leaned back in her leather chair, practically vibrating with delight at my public humiliation. She truly believed this moment would shatter my composure, forcing me to snap, argue, or break down in front of the gallery. The entire courtroom held its breath, horrified by the judge's unlawful demand. Marcus opened his mouth to object, but I gently placed a hand on his arm, silently telling him to hold his ground. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flash a look of anger. Instead, with calm, deliberate precision, I reached up with steady hands and unpinned the Navy cross from my jacket. I placed the polished metal softly onto the polished oak table in front of me. As I looked up and locked eyes with Judge Vance, a chill ran through the room. I wasn't backing down. I was executing a trap. In his desperate rush to humiliate me, Judge Vance had just committed an egregious, career-ending violation right on the official court record. The quiet in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Vance nodded with smug satisfaction, assuming he had just asserted absolute authority over my defense. He reached for his gavel to proceed with the hearing, but Marcus calmly stood up from our table. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice echoing cleanly through the silence. "Before we proceed, we request an immediate entry into the official record regarding the court's order forcing my client to remove her federally awarded military decoration. Furthermore, we submit Defense Exhibit C." Judge Vance frowned, annoyance creeping into his expression. "Mr. Davis, I have already ruled on. Exhibit C, Your Honor," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "is an official confirmation notice from the Federal Judicial Conduct Commission, alongside a copy of an active federal indictment filed less than 20 minutes ago." The judge froze, his hand lingering inches above his gavel. Marcus stepped forward, placing a thick stack of verified documents onto the clerk's desk. What this court was unaware of is that 2 weeks ago, my client filed a formal conflict of interest report with federal authorities. Attached to Exhibit C are certified bank records detailing undisclosed financial kickbacks paid directly from real estate firms owned by the plaintiff's family, Rosemary's family, into a private offshore trust registered under your name, Judge Vance. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Rosemary's smirk completely vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. Her high-priced lawyer, Richard, suddenly pulled his hands back from his desk as if the documents themselves were on fire. You can't present this here," Judge Vance stammered, all his judicial arrogance evaporating in an instant. The color drained entirely from his face as he stared at the federal seal stamped at the top of the pages. "Not only can we present it," Marcus continued, looking directly at the bench, but because you just issued an unlawful, retaliatory order against a decorated veteran on the record, while under active federal investigation for bribery tied to this exact plaintiff, you have officially compromised these entire proceedings. Federal marshals are currently standing right outside those double doors. The courtroom descended into absolute chaos. Two federal marshals pushed through the heavy wooden doors at the back of the room, their deliberate footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Judge Vance sat frozen on the bench, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, completely unable to utter a single word. The ironclad authority he had wielded just minutes earlier was totally shattered. Before the marshals even reached the front, Judge Vance hastily announced his immediate recusal from the case, practically tripping over his robes as he scrambled off the bench and retreated toward his chambers. But there was nowhere left for him to run. The paper trail Marcus had uncovered was undeniable. His 30-year legal career, his reputation, and his pension were wiped out in a single afternoon, replaced by the immediate prospect of federal prison time for judicial corruption and bribery. Across the aisle, Rosemary was shaking uncontrollably. Her lawyer, Richard, was already packing his briefcase, desperate to distance himself from her collapsing scheme before he got dragged into the criminal investigation himself. With the corrupt judge gone and the federal indictment exposed, Rosemary's fraudulent lawsuit crumbled to pieces right before our eyes. The substitute judge brought in to handle the emergency hearing took one look at the overwhelming evidence of my parents' authentic final will and the malicious, bad faith filings by the plaintiff, and dismissed the entire case with prejudice. He didn't stop there. Citing Rosemary's reckless abuse of the legal system and her attempted fraud against a veteran's legitimate inheritance, the court ordered her to pay every single dollar of my legal fees, alongside massive financial penalties that effectively wiped out her personal savings. The grand, manipulative empire she thought she had built on local corruption and family betrayal had collapsed into complete ruin, leaving her with nothing but public humiliation and mountain-high debts. Walking out of that courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, I took my Navy Cross off the table and pinned it firmly back onto my uniform jacket. The weight of the metal felt different this time, not just a symbol of the battle I had survived overseas, but a reminder of the quiet strength it took to stand up against greed and corruption right here at home. With the lawsuit behind me, I took full control of my parents' estate and business, preserving the legacy they had spent 22 years building. But I knew I couldn't just keep that victory to myself. Using a portion of the financial damages awarded from Rosemary, I established a nonprofit fund to provide free legal defense for veterans facing financial exploitation and family fraud. Rosemary got the outcome she earned, learning the hard way that manipulation and arrogance can never withstand truth and preparation. As for me, I finally found the peace I had been searching for since leaving the military, knowing I had honored my parents' memory and protected what was rightfully ours. What would you have done if you were forced to face down a corrupt system like I did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click one of the videos on your screen right now for more incredible stories. Thank you for watching.